Sabbath lesson, first paragraph says, the prophecies of Revelation were revealed in vision to the Apostle John more than 19 centuries ago during his exile on a small rocky island known as Patmos in the Aegean Sea. Revelation 1:3 pronounces a blessing on those who read the book and hear and obey its teachings. This verse refers to the congregation assembled in the church to hear the message. However, they are blessed not only because they read and listen, but because they obey the words of the book. So, first question, what is the blessing that one receives from reading the book? Why are they blessed? Is it kind of like a knighthood? Something that's bestowed by a higher authority on their subjects for a great achievement. You've read the book that I've assigned you to read, and because you've done it now, I'm going to bestow a blessing on you. Like a knighthood. Is that what it's talking about? You read the book, God uses power, boom, blessing. Or is there some design law at work here? Some natural result that comes from reading the book? Is there a blessing in enlightenment? Is there a blessing in knowing the truth? Is there a blessing in knowing the truth about God and His kingdom of love? Is there a blessing in that? Is there a blessing in having one's mind freed from lies and distortions? So, what is the blessing one receives from reading the book? Would it be healing of their hearts and minds as the truth penetrates and wins them to trust in God? And notice how that works. There is a blessing, but the blessing is a consequence of receiving the truth that is contained therein. It's not some arbitrary, well, if you say this prayer every day for 30 days, then God uses His power to give you better health, and God uses His power to give you more money and more wealth, and which some people think. This is very level 2 thinking, the quid pro quo marketplace exchange. If I do something, then God will give me something back in return. That's not the kind of blessing that we receive. But the lesson says it just isn't the results, that reading, it isn't just reading that results in blessing, but obeying that results in blessing. And what does this mean then? Not just reading, but what would the blessing be in obeying? Would that be like the knighthood? Okay, I get enlightenment if I read, but then if I do it and it's a hard work thing, then the sovereign recognizes that I've actually done what he said, and the sovereign will then give me a blessing. Is that how that blessing works? Or is there a design law at work here? What's the design law? How does that blessing work? Is there a blessing in obeying your doctor's instructions, assuming the instructions are correct? Is there a blessing in that? From where does that blessing originate or arise?
Come on.
Natural. It's a natural result.
From trust in the physician.
From trust in the physician?
I mean, that's where the process begins.
Okay, it begins in trusting the physician, but the obedience that you apply, because you trust your physician, you apply it, then where does the benefit or blessing to you come from? From the fact you trust or something you're doing results in a blessing. So your physician gives you some exercises to do, and you do the exercises. Are you getting any blessing from that? From where do they come?
It's inherent.
From moving in harmony with the laws of health, right? You made a choice to apply to your life principles or design protocols that life are built upon. One of those is the law of exertion. If you want something to get stronger, you must exercise it, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you begin choosing to operate in harmony with that design protocol, there's an inherent, built-in blessing. You can't avoid getting stronger unless you violate another law. Perhaps the law of restoration, that after you expend a resource, as a finite being, you have limited energies to spend, and after you expend the resource and exercise, you must rest and recover. The law of restoration. If you don't rest and recover, a pitcher for a Major League Baseball team throws a no-hitter. Does he pitch the next night? And if he pitches 7 nights in a row, what's likely to happen? because he's breaking another law. It's not just exercise anymore. He's not resting and recovering. It's another design law. So you can't avoid the pain and suffering that comes from breaking the design laws, but you also can't avoid the health and benefits and blessings that come from living in harmony with them. So is there a blessing in obeying the commandments? Not to murder, not to steal, not to commit adultery, not to bear false witness. Is there a blessing that comes from obeying those? From where does that blessing come? What is the blessing? And from where does it come?
A better life.
A better life? Okay. In what way is your life better if you don't murder, you don't steal, you don't bear false witness, you don't commit adultery? How's your life better? Wendell.
The blessing comes from God because that's how he designed it.
Okay. It comes from God. Through what mechanism? Through God bestowing a knighthood like a sovereign on earth? Is that how it works? You do the right thing, God is counting and watching and keeping track, and therefore God uses his power to bestow it? Or does it come through the laws that he's constructed reality to operate upon? Therefore, does one have to actually give a fealty to God to reap the blessings that come from living in harmony with his laws?
You may not know him.
So again, does one have to give fealty, acknowledge God as your sovereign, to reap the blessings that come from honesty, loyalty, faithfulness, kindness? Or do you get those blessings even if you don't even know about God? Oh, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because when you get a knighthood from a sovereign you don't recognize as your sovereign. You won't. Yes?
There are those atheists who do not believe in God, but who believe in his natural laws and who reap the benefits that God has designed into his universe.
And do you see where the benefits and the blessings, are they being blessed?
Yes.
So back to the commandment question. If you obey the commandments, is there a blessing in obedience to the commandments? From where does the blessing come? Is there a cursing in breaking the commandments? From where does the cursing come?
How a natural result.
What happens if you're stealing from your employer and your employer doesn't know at this time in human history? Your employer is unaware that you've been stealing, but you've been stealing. Do you sleep as well at night? Do you have as great a peace inside? What happens when your boss calls you into their office? What is your reaction?
Fear.
Is your reaction, I'm sure they're wanting to talk what a great job I'm doing, and you have great peace, and what? Or do you immediately have heightened anxiety, adrenaline surges, fear, worry, your mind's going, did I forget something? Did I forget to cover something? In other words, your stress circuits are just pinging out of control, right? Even though they're calling you in there to give you a Christmas card. Isn't that right? There's no peace. This to get your mind around. There's no peace in living out of harmony with God's designs. There's no peace. There's no health there. It's always harmful. What would happen? So in Romans 1, okay, here, is there blessing in worshiping the one and only true God? Is there a blessing in worshiping the one and only true God? From where does that blessing come? Sovereign, using his power to make it happen, like a fealty to a human king? Is that where it comes? Some imperial decree? Or is it a natural design law again at work? By beholding, we become changed. We become like the God we esteem and admire. So in Romans 1, Paul says, what did Paul say happened to the people who exchanged the truth of God for a lie? Who didn't think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God? They preferred images made with their own hands. What did he say happened to them?
We became like those guys.
They received in themselves.
Their minds became darkened, depraved, and futile. Why did their minds become darkened, depraved, and futile? Did God use his power from heaven to say, oh, they're not going to worship me? Okay, I'm going to harden their hearts. I'm going to warp their characters. I'm going to make their minds depraved. I'm going to use power to make it that way. It wouldn't be that way otherwise, except they've offended me and I'm going to make it happen. Or does something happen in the minds of people who worship false gods? Then what would happen in the minds of people who worship the true God? Would something different happen? Would worshiping the true God result in an expansion of one's wisdom, insight, mental faculties? Would that happen? Would that be a one-time event. It happened at one point in time when I was 12. I gave my heart to Jesus and I really came to love him. And then that was it. Or is it a continual growth because he's an infinite being and we're finite beings, that we continue to grow, and as we worship him, we gain more and more insights and more wisdoms and more perspectives. We grow in time. Which way is it? One point in time or a growing process? Would this then require a continued study, a continued application of our reasoning powers and our heart's desire to search out and spend time with God? Is this connected then, this idea that I'm describing, notice this growth, this movement forward in our spiritual insight, wisdom, and understanding, our knowledge of God in time as we apply our energies to our relationship with God, is this connected in any way with the statement that goes like this? Sanctification is the work of a lifetime. See, when you hear that statement, sanctification is the work of a lifetime, does that mean that you only get it at the end of your life? Or that it is part of living? We continue to grow in our knowledge of God and his methods and continue in our spiritual maturity as long as we are alive. It's the work of a lifetime. It's what we do our entire life. For all eternity, we continue to grow in our knowledge of God.